Right here we have a character that I can officially announce as of this video that has been elevated, if you will, to the legend status that is shared by the likes of other creations of mine such as Riot, Yoshi Togo, Sarah Warfield, Tadako Togo, and so on. This, of course, is the King of Sports, aka the Last Lion, aka the founder and team captain of Lion's Pride. There you see their logo. Of course, I speak of the German shooter himself, Magnus Von Schwartz, who is one of my favorite characters to make every year because of the history that the character actually has within the XWA. Obviously, I adopted him from the E-Fed era of my XWA Fed, and he's carried over and has done pretty well for himself, I would say. He is actually aged at 62 years of age and looks the way that he does. So he's in as good of a physical conditioning, possibly even better than wrestlers or competitors that are 3 times younger than him, and he's still going strong. So the obvious reason why I decided to make him a legend is because of his mentor status, if you will, as the leader of the Lion's Pride camp. I don't really know what I should call them properly, whether they're a camp, an academy, a team, a faction. There's something in the middle to that, but yeah, the purpose of Lion's Pride obviously was for that Magnus Von Schwartz to impart his experience in professional wrestling and combat sports in general, the combat arts, I mean, to a younger generation of superstars, to which obviously he has 3 disciples. As of this video, I will confirm that there will actually be more in the not so distant future that will be joining Lion's Pride, so look forward to that in the coming months. But yeah, getting into the designs for his attire here, these are pretty much the same assets that I had found and worked around in Photoshop when we could actually import actual logos and pictures and stuff like that back in WWE 2K16. So I have not made any changes to them because I don't really see any need to change any of his logo work. It's no Photoshop style whatsoever. These are just lion's crest designs and so on and so forth that I found online through Google search, and put the text on them, added some bevels and embossing and such in Photoshop on the text, not on the logo, and that was it, pretty much. And that's just been what it is that he's used on his attires ever since then. The only difference being placement. Well, not really. The placement's pretty much identical to how it's always been. That's just the kind of guy that Magnus is. He's really no frills. He's not all about, you know, extravagance, attires, and looking a certain way. You know, it was actually only recent, like as of 2K16, the first game of this current generation, that I even put knee pads on the character. Like in the E-Fed, he was just tights and boots. Really, really basic look to him. So, as far as his character and persona is concerned, you can't see it facially because I actually used the actual CGI render for the face, because I couldn't find a face that was fitting of Magnus in the form of actual people. with the exception of one person, whom was the actual inspiration for the character Magnus Von Schwartz, that being a former mixed martial arts champion turned very prominent mixed martial arts analyst, and he does podcasts and stuff like that. That, of course, being Bas Rutten. And the reason why, and I've said this before when I previewed him in last year's game in the weekly upload update videos, is that you cannot for the life of you find a picture of Bas Rutten where he is not smiling or smirking. I mean, for a guy who is obviously capable of whipping as much ass as he is, and for a guy who has basically made his name in such an aggressive and pretty much closest thing to a blood sport as you could possibly get in mixed martial arts, he's always in a really, really positive mood. I gotta respect that. But yeah, it made it next to impossible to find a decent looking face texture for him. So I had to go another direction. But yeah, if I could, I would make Magnus look like Bas Rutten, because that's basically the type of persona that he has. Maybe a bit more on the serious side. Bas is a bit more of a jokester, you know, trickster type of guy. Magnus is a little more disciplined. But other than that, yeah, that's just basically a little character background for those of you who might not have watched the video last year where I showed him off. Other than that, there's pretty much not that a lot for me to say about him. Well, I could probably chime in a little bit about his wrestling style, because it's very, very similar to that of Angelus Aurelius, or just Angelus now, utilizing that kind of European / Greco-Roman style that focuses heavily on suplexes, submissions, holds, that type of thing. Now, a little bit of a trivia for you, Easter egg if you will. Last year when I first created Aurora Cellini, I basically copied Magnus's moveset over to her. So she was just basically the female version of Magnus Von Schwartz, at least in terms of moveset is concerned. This year I did a little bit more tweaking and actually have individual movesets for all the members of Lion's Pride. They will have some nuances to them that are similar to each other, but they are their own individual cause or character creations stylistically. So just that little blurb for you as well. As we take a look at the entrance attire for Mr. Von Schwartz, it's pretty much uniform to all other members of Lion's Pride, as it is that I also showed you when I previewed Aurora Cellini. The same layout and design for the Lion's Pride team jacket remains consistent. You got the Lion's Pride logo on the right side, and then on the left side of the chest, that would be your right on screen, will be their flag of the country of their origin. So obviously Magnus being German, it would be the German flag. Aurora Cellini has the Italian flag, because obviously she's from Italy. And then there is Jesse Rison and Rob Kozmos, who both represent the United States. So they'll have the old stars and stripes on their jacket with the abbreviation of their home country underneath it. Pretty consistent design, and I actually like it because it's really, it's got that kind of sporty feel to it, and I like to make my attires for the most part seem a bit more sportier nowadays. I still do ornate stuff here and there, but if I can pull off stuff that looks like this, that actually looks like authentic sports apparel, it's a nice touch. It's a cool thing. I kind of spoke about that briefly when I was talking about the House of Wolves, how I wanted them to have like Under Armour type gear for their entrance attire, but obviously couldn't pull it off because of limitations. That type of stuff. So anyway, We got the back of the jacket here, pretty much same story, the same name logo as on the back of his tights. Consistent design throughout. It's pretty much the exact same layout of every single design element that I have used on him for the past 3 or so years. If it isn't broke, no need to fix it. And Magnus isn't the type of guy who's going to come out with a new look every season just for the hell of it. He's what you see is what you get, like the personification of that. So it shows in his look, it shows in his style. He's just a real consummate traditionalist and professional as well. Now we have his alternate attire, and it's pretty much the same thing as the primary. Once again, same exact logo elements that I've used throughout my creation of him on the current generation of consoles, that being PlayStation 4. We just have an alternate lion here, not with a crest, but just an actual kind of tribal-ish lion logo. And then on the flip side, same thing with the abbreviation of his initials, MVS, which is a common identifier that I use for him when I just don't want to say Magnus Von Schwartz. Also in the fact that that name happens to be a bit too long to use on certain text fields in the game. So we had to cut it down to the initials. So that's been one thing that's kind of stuck with him as well. And aside from that, pretty much everything else is the same, because there's not much of anything else to show here. Once again, very, very simplistic attire, and sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Depends on the character. For a character like Magnus here, it's absolutely perfect. And then lastly, alternate version. Well, not really alternate version, I guess it's just a different jacket. You could call that alternate, I suppose. But everything on the front is still the same as it was on the primary attire, with the exception of the back, having the same back logo as the back of his trunks on this particular attire. And that's pretty much it. Not much else going on there. Nothing much else is necessary to go on. That is Magnus Von Schwartz in a nutshell for 2018. And yeah, Lion's Pride is going to be doing some really significant things, making strides within the pecking order of the XWA, as it is that I've already kind of alluded to you. There's going to be some new members, and yeah, they're going to make their presence known more so this year than last year, considering the fact that I barely used any of them because I didn't do a whole lot of videos, because 2K17 was a little jerky for me. But we're going full blast this year, and you're going to see a whole lot more of these characters, and certain ones are going to have a whole lot more influence. Mr. Von Schwartz being one of the main of them. So look forward to that. So the first of Magnus's disciples, like quite literally the first here, is Jesse Rison. And this, of course, is the 2018 version of the Brooklyn-born super athlete. Obviously, he is the most athletic of the bunch. He would be the equivalent to Shelton Benjamin, basically. The story behind him, obviously, lots of raw, untapped athletic ability and talent, to the point where even on his own, he was able to capture the XWA at the time Intercontinental Championship, which would eventually be changed into the National Championship that he lost in a multi-man match. He never lost one-on-one to Union King. Keep that asterisk there, because it's going to be something that will be revisited very soon in 2018. So anyway, Mr. Magnus saw that potential that he had, but saw that there was not direction driving it And so he took Jesse under his wing voluntarily and kind of cleaned him up, kind of, you know, gave him more of a strategy to go with all that raw, untapped ability that he has within him. And that in turn began to sow the seeds that eventually would become the Lion's Pride camp, to which Mr. Rison here has a very, very prominent role within it. He's the field captain, if you will. So, yeah. Just like in the case of Magnus, a lot of his logos that I used are the same that I made many, many moons ago in 2K16 for him and have just repeated using. Obviously, the new functions in the creation suite allow me to make the layouts and thus the actual attires themselves look quite different from how it is that I had made them in previous versions of the game. Specifically on the tights there, where you can see the kind of bigger JR logo, well, one version of a JR logo. Got the Lion's Pride logo there on the side, because I don't have room to put it anywhere else, because the other JR logo that I have here on the back is real freaking big. And that's exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to take up as much space as possible so that you're not seeing the black so much as you're noticing the logo work. And the same thing applies down low here to the kick pads. Once again, you got the Lion's Pride logo branded on the left leg, and then the JR branding on the right leg. That logo there is actually I found out it's the logo to a vehicle manufacturing company. They do like buses in Japan. I forgot the actual name of the company itself, but I was looking for a logo that had the J and the R co-joined to each other, and I found two. This was one, and the one on the front is the other. And yeah, that's what we went with. So, yeah. As we take a look at the tattoos, once again, same stuff that you see on the previous versions of him. Kind of like an urban feel to them, because like I said, he is a Brooklyn native, so I wanted the tattoo work to kind of reflect the fact that he's from that area, representing Bed-Stuy. Yeah. And then we got the kind of Celtic dragon griffin thing going on in the back, which looks cool. You know, it fits him. It fits on the fact that it looks great on him. You know, I didn't really have much of a theme as far as the back tattoo, and I didn't want to change anything, so I decided to stick with this one as opposed to going with something that had a bit more of a you know, urban type of feel to it, because those get kind of crazy and I didn't want to do that. Anyway, I was thinking about putting some logos or tattoos on his chest to kind of make him further resemble the actual person who his face is based off of, which was a British-born athlete slash bodybuilder that goes by the name of David McIntosh. I think he actually played a sport, I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, he has tattoos on his chest, and I wanted to kind of maybe make him look a little bit similar to the genuine article, but then I said to myself, nah, I like the fact that it's kind of a variation of that, and we're just using the face for, you know, obvious facial recognition purposes. You know, I wanted him to be a lighter toned guy, so that's what I went with. But I didn't want to use like an actor or a model or something like that, so yeah. One thing leads to another. Here is his entrance gear, and like I said, it's pretty uniform across every member of Lion's Pride, that they will be rocking the warm-up jacket representing their country, on the front, and then their own specific logo on the back. You see the JR variant there that I made to look kind of sort of similar to that of the Brooklyn Nets logo. That was the thing that I wanted to do, and it's something that you will definitely see in his alternate attire, which is a recurring trend that I do for his secondary attire. So yeah, so for the secondary attire, we've got the more traditional short trunks going on here with the kind of like team stripes on the sides there. I think those are CM Punk. No, those aren't CM Punk. Or are they? I'm not sure. But yeah, I wanted to go with something with the stripes on the side to kind of give that whole sporty, almost like basketball type of feel to it. Then we have the name logo on the front. His name in regular blackface type. That is the actual font, or a variation of the actual font that is used for the Brooklyn Nets uniform and logo. So I went with as much authenticity as possible for it, because that's the kind of look that I wanted to emulate for this particular attire. Then you see the Lion's Pride logo there underneath. On the back, you see a variation of the JR logo, the co-joined circular one. And again, it's circular because I wanted it to resemble the Nets logo as close as possible. The only difference, obviously, is it doesn't have a basketball slapped right in the middle of it. Obviously, that would make no sense for a wrestler to have a basketball on his ring gear. In actuality, this is kind of sort of a variation of an attire that JTG was rocking on Raw for the tail end of his tenure in WWE before he finally got released. Yeah, another example of talent that was completely squandered by WWE. Why the hell did you not use Crime Time the way that you should have used Crime Time? Now you got the Street Profits in NXT, which is basically Crime Time 2.0. And, you know, you had it the first time. Hopefully you don't mess it up the second time. Rant over. But anyway, that's just basically it. I kind of went simplistic on the kick pads and just put the silver version of the round logo on the knees. Nothing else there, because I wanted it to look kind of cleaner and more athletic. I was debating whether I wanted to put stripes along the sides of the kick pads. Maybe I might actually do that at some point, just to see how it looks and if I like it. But for right now, I just have it plain black with the logo. And since Mr. Rison here isn't necessarily going to be uploaded in the immediate future, I can just as easily make that edit, and that'll be on the final product that you will have in your game when he is uploaded in the not so distant future. So you could say he's 99.5% done as far as that regard goes. But pretty complete, pretty clean, and yeah. Now let's have a look at the ring gear for attire number 2. So yeah, this is the closest thing to variation that I have ever done or will probably ever do. Then again, maybe I might do something a little different in this same vein as far as the entrance gear goes, because for the most part, Lion's Pride's ring gears are pretty uniform, but obviously this warm-up jacket is not uniform. And that just goes into the fact that, you know, Rison's the more established competitor out of the 3 Lion's Pride disciples, so I can stand to you know, give him his own exclusive gear as opposed to a traditional track jacket that I have for the other 2. He still represents Lion's Pride, as you obviously see there on the badge, then you see the Jesse Rison logo, which is a little more elongated there, so you can actually see the fact that, like I said, this is the same font that the Brooklyn Nets use, because it's the exact same font that the Brooklyn Nets use. And then along the back, we have the black and white version of the Jesse Rison round logo. No need to put a flag, because this is more of an individual type of jacket style here. And yeah, like I said, I might actually change it up for the other two, as in Aurora and Rob Kozmos, to do the same for their alternates. But I would have to also do more specific alternate attires for them, because in those cases they're a lot closer to Magnus's, where there's only very subtle variations to their ring gear between primary and secondary, whereas Jesse's here is a wee bit more dramatic, so it makes sense for him. But we'll see. Anyway, there you have Jesse Rison 2018, 1/4 of Lion's Pride, and yeah, like I said, he's got some things that he's going to be looking into in the 2018 season as well. Some unfinished business, if you will. Stay tuned for that. And the last character that rounds out Lion's Pride, this of course is the Starman, Rob Kozmos. And yeah, just to kind of paraphrase the backstory behind him, he was originally a character that I had created specifically for the EFED era of the XWA for somebody to use, and they had developed a story arc where Rob Kozmos was going to be the protege, if you will, to Magnus Von Schwartz. And there was this whole other thing that they had planned as far as that goes. So when I was pulling old ideas back out of the old archives of my brain for characters to use in order to fill in the XWA roster, Mr. Kozmos here came to mind, specifically because of that aspect and the fact that I kind of absorbed that same story arc, if you will, between Magnus and Jesse that was originated between Magnus and Kozmos here. So I decided to put that all together, and it all made sense considering the fact that, you know, such a thing or such an idea or gimmick or faction, if you will, had already been done previously in the form of Team Angle. So one thing led to another, as I've said before, and the end result is what you see now. And yeah, from outward appearances, you can see, if you've seen the previous version of him, that the 2018 version of Mr. Kozmos is a whole lot beefier, kind of in the same vein of what I did with Clayton Lang. That's in great deal to the body morphing functions. And the other reason I did that is because I wanted to give him some size, because I was kind of on the fence of what type of style wrestler I want him to be. Obviously, Magnus Von Schwartz is a power and technical type of guy, and to an extent, Jesse Rison is too. I mean, like I said before, I don't do small wrestlers, but Rison would obviously be the more athletic of them, you know, using the springboard moves and some high-flying stuff, things of that nature. And I wanted Kozmos here to be kind of a contrast to that, but not so much of a contrast to where he's wrestling exactly the same way that Magnus does. So I think what I'm going to do, or what it is that I have done and will probably elaborate on a little bit more, is have him lean more towards the power end and not so much the technical end of things. Like, he'll still have, you know, the signature Lion's Pride stuff of holds and suplexes, but he'll be one that's more inclined to using power moves like bench presses, power bombs, power slams, things of that nature, to reflect the fact that he's obviously spent an extensive time in the gym. So we might as well put all that muscle to use, don't you think? Yeah. Once again, just like everybody else, the logos here are pretty much the same logos that I used in the previous game, just in different placements. And it comes out looking pretty good. We've got the Lion's Pride logo inside of the star there. And I got the stars wrapped around the knee pads, the name logo on the boots. It's pretty self-explanatory. Like I said, still kind of in tune to the layout and design attire for Magnus, which has no variation to it. And I decided to keep that kind of uniform look across the majority of Lion's Pride, with Rison obviously being the one exception to that rule, but still he's within that same kind of parameter where it's kind of a clean, athletic type of look. Now obviously stars and stuff like that I wouldn't necessarily attribute to being athletic, but there's significance to that because I kind of have him in a way, the same way that I have other things from fictitious video games or fictitious wrestling games kind of intertwined into the lore, if you will, of the XWA. I have it so that Mr. Kozmos here is actually a son of the actual Starman that appeared in NES Pro Wrestling back in the day. You know, the one that was wearing all pink and only had a star for a face. Still kind of questioning whether or not he was human or if he was actually alien or not. But we'll just say that that was a very, very elaborate attire in this case. And Mr. Kozmos here is the offspring of that Starman. And as such, I've actually kind of thought about doing a variation of his attire that's based off of that Starman. Work in progress. I have no idea how I'm going to pull it off, but yeah, I decided I wanted to do that because the nickname, you know, I wanted to kind of have it so that it had that significance, and it's just not that I'm, you know, stealing the name Starman or using it for other means. So he put that together, and it also creates a little kind of interesting backstory for him. So yeah, we'll go with that. And you see the entrance attire, once again, same uniform, track jacket that they walk out to the ring with. And then you got the Kozmos logo and star along the back, in tuned to the same layout of everybody else's. Very uniform. And I like that uniformity. It makes them feel a lot more like a team, as like an actual athletic team, than a traditional faction in professional wrestling, which is, you know, a nice touch, something that's not done very often. So it's cool when it does. And so for his alternate attire, a couple of variations here. Instead of the last name logo, we've got the Starman logo across the left side. Same placement of everything else with the star and the Lion's Pride logo on the right. And then for his knee pads, you got the Lion's Pride logo on them as opposed to the bare star. And everything else is pretty much the same. So you got the logos on the boots there, and that's pretty much it. Just a subtle variation, like I said, still in tune with what it is that I do with Magnus's attire. And like I said before, I might change that up sometime in the not so distant future for both Mr. Kozmos and for Aurora Cellini, as far as their alternate ring gears are concerned. But at this point, I decided to keep everything uniform, and we'll just go from there. And then we have the ring gear, entrance gear. Once again, same stuff. The only difference is the name logo being swapped out. And aside from that, everything's pretty much identical. And yeah, that's just the uniform look that's signature to Lion's Pride, which I will elaborate on at a future date and give maybe a slight hint more individuality to the disciples of the King of Sport. But right now, they're good where they're at, and it's about building them up into that force that can be considered to be one of the more dominant within the XWA landscape. It's only a matter of time with these guys because they have the talent, they have the tutelage, and yeah, I'm looking forward to coming up with good matchups for all of them in singles and tag team competition. But that is going to do it for Mr. Kozmos 2018. We have another returning talent from 2017, second year creation. Well, at least in terms of this actual generation of WWE games. This, of course, is Jake Creed. And yeah, real quick backstory on Creed. This isn't actually the first time that I made him. I actually kind of resurrected him from the previous generation of WWE games, in which I only actually made him twice. He was originally used briefly as a character that I was using in an E-Fed before I decided I wanted to pull myself out of that situation, and eventually sow the seeds that would eventually become the XWA. And he went on the cutting room floor then. I made one more version of him just for general gameplay in SmackDown vs. Raw. I want to say 2012. It was the last one before they changed. Yeah, it was the last game before they changed the title to WWE and the year of its release. So yeah, that would be SmackDown vs. Raw 2012. And he did not get created again until last year in WWE 2K17. And now he becomes a permanent part of the XWA roster. Kind of like in that middle of the road tier of guys. As good as he looks, to say that he's a mid-card talent is kind of sort of disheartening, but in the process of me creating characters, I basically have to come to the realization that there are going to be some characters that I'm going to be using a lot more prominently than I will others. And Jake Creed here kind of falls into that category. There will probably be a point in time where I give him a push to you know, higher levels of competition and have him facing off against the Christian Phoenixes and the Riots of the XWA, my top tier, you know, main event caliber talent. But as of right now, he's a guy who is trying to make his way through, at least in a character standpoint, and, you know, raise himself within the ranks and the pecking order of the XWA. And he most certainly has the tools to be able to do this, just by looking at him. You know, he's a very physically imposing guy, which was, of course, the intention of him. So the design and inspiration for the character, I've also explained this the last time that I showed him in the weekly upload updates for 2K17, was inspired by one of the contestants to the second Tough Enough competition, if you can even call it a freaking competition. Anyway, his name was Jake. He just went by Jake on the show, but his actual name is Jake Sokolov. And yeah, I really, really liked his look. He was a big, strong, muscular guy. You know, had the blonde crew cut, he kind of resembled Brock Lesnar a whole lot. You know, this was obviously well before Brock Lesnar even was on the radar in the sport of professional wrestling, and he had that type of look to him. The type of look that you would have thought, in all honesty, Vince McMahon would have been all over. But it turns out in that second Tough Enough competition that they went with 2 females as the winners, even though they were both male and female contestants, which was something that was being pushed heavily for that competition. And you know, we all know how that all worked out in the end. Tough Enoughs don't necessarily work out very well at all as far as who wins and who loses. But yeah, I really always thought that this guy had the potential. He had the look. He most certainly had the look to be somebody in that era of WWE or WWF, as it were, but not to be. But I kind of immortalized that look in Jake Creed here, sort of, where you got kind of like the crew cut thing going. Not so much a crew cut, kind of like a spiked up look there for the hair, but you know, that's always been the underlying design inspiration for the character as far as his appearance is concerned. Personality wise, still a work in progress. He's really kind of a blue collar type of guy. You know, he's wrestling to support his family, not necessarily like, you know, the traditional wife kids type of thing. He has like a sister who is I have, as far as backstory goes, undergoing treatments for cancer, so you know, he's using the money for that, and he's kind of really how you say, I don't want to say wholesome, but kind of a really traditional type of face type of character, the guy that you want to see win because you get behind what it is that he's fighting for. And you know, that's the element right there. That's the opening for me to push him into greater heights, if you will, within the XWA in due time. But I have a whole lot of other stories to tell before I even get to that point, using other characters that he's kind of like on the second tier, pretty much the second level of what it is that I'm doing with the overall show and the Fed, if you will. So yeah, that's the primary attire. We'll have a look real quick at his entrance gear now. It's pretty much the same cut off sleeveless type of Scott Hall Ryback-ish shirt thing going. You know, the logo's obviously cropped off because the shirt's been modified, if you will. Nothing on the back, but again, for reference, this is the Ascension shirt. You find it in the WWE tab of tops. I would have thought it would have been logical for them to have a blank one in the general tab, but not to be. But yeah, you know, you gotta improvise sometimes, and that's exactly what we did. So yeah, there goes your entrance gear. Now we will take a look at his alternate. So the only real variation with his alternate attire is the fact that we use a different logo on the trunks. These are the same logos that I had used for him in last year's attire. It's just obviously I'm able to do a little bit more with the placement and layout of the logos, thanks to the fact that we have that wrap function that makes you able to make them cover more area. So on the back side here, we've got the skull and the brass knuckles a little more prominently along the posterior. And then we have the full Jake Creed logo, Pride in Spirit, on the front. Pretty self-explanatory. I mean, he's a no-frills type of wrestler, so obviously his ring gear is going to look the part, but still have that type of feel to it, to where you know that this guy means business when he steps into the ring. He's also one of what I like to classify as the heavy hitters in the XWA, on the fact that his primary finisher is a striking attack. There are several of these particular individuals that I have, specifically in the men's division, that use strikes as finishers. I've always been a proponent of using strikes as finishing maneuvers, so long as they look convincingly enough like they could knock someone out long enough to be pinned for a 3 count. And I'm very happy that WWE has, you know, gone back to incorporating that, because there was a long time where striking moves weren't able to be used as finishers and even signature moves for some cases. But they changed that towards the first game of the current generation, that being the PlayStation 4 and Xbox, where you could use, like, you know, kicks and the strong strikes and things of that nature as finishing maneuvers. So Mr. Creed's finisher is the WMD. That's the knockout punch that the Big Show uses. He also has the Roman Reigns Superman punch. And yeah, like I said, he's not the only guy who's going to be using a striking maneuver as a primary. He also has a secondary finisher that's your more traditional power move, you know, that's more symbolizing the fact that he's a really, really big, strong guy. He's about 300 pounds, and obviously a lot of that is muscle, so obviously I'm going to have to give him a big power move as a finisher as well. But he's got that knockout blow that makes him in the heavy hitter category. And like I said, you'll see who the others in that category are, and they're all pretty logical in their application of their strikes, considering it's a an element of their wrestling style, and it's an element of his because, you know, he's all about knuckling up, you know, and fighting for what you believe in, fighting for what's important to you. And yeah, it also has some reference into Destiny as well. I guess I might as well mention that too, since I'm on a whole Destiny kick here anyway. The name that I gave to his finishing maneuver, that being the WMD, he calls it the Last and Surest Argument, which is a reference to a character in Destiny's lore who is part of the Titan class, and her name was Wei Ning. And this was her thing, on the fact that she always utilized her fists as not only her primary source of offense, but also in terms of the overall strategy and mentality of the Titan class. The fist is that one last offense that you have. When your guns and your armor and your powers all fail you, you still at least have that fist as your last and surest argument against your opponent. So that carries over into him on the fact that it is his last ounce of strength and his last resort to taking out his opponent and making that the key to victory and achieving what it is that he has set out for himself. And it just plain sounds like a badass name to use for a finishing maneuver. So there you have it. And yeah, I had at a couple of times thought maybe I wanted to add some form of Titan related stuff to his ring gear, but yeah, I just decided to just stick with the logos that I have because they're good on their own. And maybe at some point, if I do any edits or change his look for his attire, then I might mess with some different logo designs and go with that. But yeah, it's a bit of backstory for you. And that is Jake Creed for 2017. He's got a lot of potential, and it won't be long before that potential is realized. But yeah, for right now, he's just a really damn good looking CAW. And here we have the 2018 version of one of my personal favorite creations to make year to year. This, of course, being the one and only Syrus The Entertainer. Now, there's one very, very big difference between last year to this year, and that is the face. This face here I had previously been using for one of my newer characters, one that I made last year, Sydney Striker, who of course is one of Yoshi Togo's disciples in the Togo Dojo. And for Syrus, I had been using the face texture of an actor by the name of Michael Shannon Jenkins, who played the character Turbo Jones in Undisputed 3. Now, in me working out how it is that I wanted Sydney Striker to look like for this year's version of the game, it kind of sort of went into that direction of being close to that character from that movie. So I decided to just go ahead and switch the face textures that I use and use that texture of Jenkins on Striker, so that he's more of a character that's closer to that of Turbo from Undisputed. And he'll even wind up being like a rival to Vasily Rasputin, who is based off of Yuri Boyka from the same film. So yeah, it's kind of one thing leading into another, and just a flip, and I'll get into more detail of that when it is that I actually show you Sydney Striker himself. But basically I switched their faces, the long and the short of it. Does not take anything away from the character, however, because obviously Syrus, being the guy that he is the consummate entertainer. Well, not necessarily entertainer, more so showman. Pretty much, he is what happens when you take guys like The Rock and Apollo Creed, and by extension Muhammad Ali, who the character Apollo Creed was based very, very closely towards, and MVP, Montel Vontavious Porter, slapped them all together into one character, and you would get something like this. Well, you probably wouldn't get something like this, but this is how it is that I've pretty much formulated that combination of personas in my own personal universe. It is this guy Syrus. He is as flashy, flamboyant, confident, and charismatic as any character that I have made or will make in the XWA, to the point where he is the only character on the men's roster who has a momentum rating of 100. So he will gain momentum faster than anyone else. Kind of a nod to the fact that he has the most charisma of anybody on the men's roster. So just little subtle things there to kind of differentiate him or establish him from the pack. You can obviously see there is a lot of MVP inspired in his attire. That's something that's carried over pretty much from the very first time that I created him, back in the previous generation of games. And it's just a matter of the character behind the appearance evolving into something greater, to the point where now he is, like I said, probably my favorite character amongst all of the men's roster. And that's saying something, because I make some pretty good looking guys as far as the men's roster is concerned. But just the way that I put together his attire, his moves, the way everything flows together and makes him look like a real showy, flamboyant, and flashy son of a bitch. It just works, and I love the way that it comes out every year. So some subtle differences, however, with the attire is the fact that I kind of changed some textures. I had like a little bit of gold going on in the back side of the, I guess you could say, suit here. That was replaced by some purple velvet. Yeah, some velvety effects. I think this is actually the pearlescent material texture that I used on the trapezoid primitive, but it looks like velvet. I wanted it to look like velvet because you can add another flashy, flamboyant wrestler persona to the long-standing list of inspirations that will be the evolution of Syrus the Entertainer, and that is one Patrick Clark, currently assigned to NXT and going by the moniker of the Velveteen Dream. So, yeah. I'm actually kind of sort of debating whether I want to convert another character into more of a Velveteen Dream-ish type of person. Has not yet been made, but I'm sure some of you might remember the character Magic. I had for a long time thought I wanted to put those two, as in Syrus and Magic, in some kind of program, either as a team or as opponents. I think opponents would be a little bit more interesting, but yeah, still brainstorming right there. But as far as the attire goes, there's a whole lot of different textures going on up and down, because I wanted to kind of make his look be a little bit more, what's the word? Extravagant. Syrus is one of those type of characters that I will go all out on the designs for, because I want that look to be something that stands out. And I think I nailed it again. I mean, even though it's pretty much just variation of the same type of attire that I've made for him historically, it's just those little different touches here and there that I added that make this version look a little different, but still have that same overall appeal to him. And so for the entrance gear, the typical walkout shirt here, with a brand spanking new logo that I added. I made that this year for him with some help from Google search and Photoshop. The Purple Planetarium is the collective name of Syrus's fan base. I originally went with Purple Posse, but I wanted it to be a little more sci-fi, you know, funkadelic type of thing going on there. So Planetarium, you know, makes a whole lot more sense. It's kind of something like the Rosebuds, but with a little more Soul Train. If you can actually envision that, that would be what the Purple Planetarium would be. It's out there. He is out there. Syrus is definitely a unique individual, to say the least. And then we got the back of the shirt there. Very familiar phrase from Gladiator that I have obviously incorporated into Mr. Syrus's gimmick or overall package, and it works. I like the font, I like the style that I used. Everything flows together pretty well. That whole combination of purple with the gold and things of that nature happening. And then speaking of gold, obviously, Razor Ramon style bling around the neck, because, you know, he's a baller like that, so gotta look the part. And then we got the sunglasses with a little of a Macho Man type touch here, putting the stars on the eyeballs. I wanted to stretch them out a little bit, but the problem is that it kind of overlaps into the frame, and that's not a good look. So we just have to kind of keep it concentrated into the lens there, but it still looks cool. Very, very unique look going on here for his entrance gear. Kind of a mashup, again, of different characters that all have that same kind of charismatic and flamboyant flair to them. And that's basically what Syrus is. He's a tribute to all those type of guys. Then for the alternate attire, this one looks a whole lot closer to that of MVP's actual ring gears, when he started wearing more black and secondary colors as opposed to the, you know, primary colors with white that kind of made him look like a Power Ranger, which prompted those Power Ranger chants from the crowd and probably prompted him to change the look of his attire to black with colors as opposed to white with colors, if I'm being honest. Yeah. Also, the fact that I got him in cornrows kind of also makes him look a little bit more closer to MVP. And then, of course, the headband up top there. Unfortunately, they don't have the old school British Bulldog braids that I had been using in the previous generation of games for his alternate attire. It kind of fit a little bit more because it was a lot of hair, so you know, you would imagine that takes a lot of braiding, considering the fact that he has a big old afro. But you know, braids pretty much take up a lot of hair to use or to make, for those of you who are unfamiliar with cornrows, or as we like to call them, struggle braids. If he were to take all that out, it would look exactly the way that his hair in his primary attire looks. Probably even bigger, because the purpose of braiding your hair is actually to help it grow faster. So, yeah. It ends up being kinda authentic, at least from an anatomic or scientific standpoint. I just actually wish that I could make them just a bit longer, or if they just had the British Bulldog's old hairstyle in the game, that would work just as well. There's not much else to say here. It's pretty much a lot of the same logo work, just in different placements to create a different look overall for him. Only variation is the bottom side here, where I put gold stars as opposed to the purple stars, because I wanted them to kind of stand out a little bit more and have a little bit of a match to the gold trim on the top. And then we got the Stardust boots here on the bottom. I'm actually probably going to change the white trim on all the stars into a yellowish gold color, just to fit the rest of the color scheme. But aside from that, his secondary attire looks pretty clean and still really fitting into that whole character persona that I have envisioned for him. You know, it's like, I've always said this, well, I've said this to a couple of close friends of mine that are familiar with my work, that if I were to have ever gotten into professional wrestling at a young age, the character gimmick that I would have came up with was, or would have been, Syrus The Entertainer. I would have been a complete and total show-off. Just all out, balls out flashiness to the point of, you know, either one or two things are going to happen. Either the fans are going to love me, or the fans are going to absolutely hate me. But as long as I'm getting a response, that's all that matters. And then we have the secondary attires, entrance gear, just another alternate take of the walkout shirt. We got the "Are You Entertained" text logo on the front this time as opposed to on the back. and then the standard Syrus star, try and saying that 3 times fast, on the back of the shirts. I experimented with different colors on the shirt, and I decided I just wanted to keep it purple, because purple is a thing, you know, that's his color of choice. And black would have looked a little too plain or closer to other walkout shirts that I have for other characters, and I want him to stand out. And I went with that same color or shade of yellow that I have on the trim of his top, and that was a little too loud, even by Syrus' standards. So I decided at the last second just to go and stick with the purple motif here. So that's what we got. And that, in a nutshell, is Syrus Cleophas Aloysius Sykes Jr. Yeah, that's his full government name right there. AKA Syrus The Entertainer 2018. And looking forward to getting him into the thick of things in the XWA. He is a major player. Even though I have not used him as much as I'd like to, he's a former XWA World Heavyweight Champion, and I am definitely going to have him back in the main event in some way, shape, or form here in 2018. And that was a really loud damn horn.